Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about another topic that is super popular, especially right now, post pandemic, and that is how to use and how to deal with travel vouchers, future flight credits, whatever you might want to call them. Basically, when the airline gives you compensation or a refund, but not in the form of cash, in the form of a voucher or credit that you can apply to future bookings. Now, I want to take some time to demystify these a little bit because I think that travel credits and future flight credits, vouchers, whatever you want to call them, can be a real headache for a lot of people. They're all different. Even some airlines will issue different types of credits or vouchers. There are loads of restrictions, rules vary from voucher to voucher, credit to credit, and it can be a bit of a minefield figuring out how to use them and actually redeem their value. So let's start off by talking about some of the situations when you might be issued one of these credits. So the first and most common situation is if you cancel a trip where you're entitled to some kind of refund. Now, every fare class is different, every airline is different. Sometimes you'll be entitled to a cash refund, but sometimes you'll only be entitled to one of these future flight credits for some or all of the value of your original ticket. Another circumstance is if you've been bumped off of a flight, if a flight's oversold or canceled and you're issued a credit for a future booking because they're not able to resolve your situation right then and there and get you on another flight. Sometimes they do get you on another flight, but it's given as compensation. And it's important to check the local laws in your area because in a lot of these circumstances, you are entitled to ask for cash compensation. It varies depending on country, state, airline, fare class. It's very complicated. I'm not getting into it today. I'm just dealing with the situation where you walk away from one of these circumstances with a voucher for future travel. And there can be a handful of other situations. So, one thing that arose for us is we were supposed to travel to Mexico City with my daughter as a lap infant. We get to the airport. They can't find her ticket in the system. So, they have the 3 seats booked for myself, my wife, and my son, but they can't find her lap infant ticket in the system. I had confirmation of it. We went back and forth for hours. Funny enough, the gate agent or the check-in agent was on the phone with the airline waiting on hold, which is interesting to me because I would have thought that they had more of a direct line to the airlines, but apparently they just called the same phone number that I would have called as a customer. Long story short, we missed the flight. We had to get rebooked like 10 hours later. It was a bit of a nightmare. So they issued us a future flight credit for our inconvenience. So if you have one of these credits, how do you go about using them? Well, the first thing is to make sure that you read the fine print very carefully. Every airline's future flight credit or voucher system is different. So just some of the ones I've dealt with here. United is pretty good. If you have an online account, they'll usually load it immediately into your online account. And as long as you book through them, you can pretty much choose any flight, any fare class, and you'll get a credit for the amount of the voucher credited directly towards your purchase. So, like I said, we have those credits from our Mexico City trip. They're with United. And every time I search for flights through United's website, I get quoted a price after the fare has been reduced by the amount of the credit. You can also add in other credits as well. So there were credits for myself, my wife, and my son. So I would add in their voucher numbers and I could add them to my account as well. And that leads us to the first typical restriction, which is that you usually have to book through the airline's website. So if you've watched my videos about Skyscanner and Google Flights, you'll know that a lot of times those search engines will take you to different travel agents that might offer the tickets for cheaper than the airline. If you have a future flight credit, that's usually not going to work. You're probably going to have to book through the airline's website. These credits usually have expiry dates as well. So you want to make sure that you're booking in advance of those dates. And read the fine print very carefully. Most of the credits I have seen say that you have to book by that date, but they don't necessarily require you to travel by that date. And again, double check, but let's say you have a future flight credit that expires June 30th. You could potentially book a flight, say next week or the week after, and book it for sometime in the fall. And as long as you've booked before the expiry date, the credit is valid. There might be certain restrictions on routes or classes of travel. I've seen this more with Spirit credits than any other. Spirit credits are, in my opinion, a nightmare to use, and I've actually never been successful at booking with a Spirit credit. They usually have blackout dates, which you can find on their website. Certain routes don't work. And I can't really figure out which routes or why. There seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes they'll search a route and the credit goes through, and sometimes it doesn't. You can't really enter the credit on the mobile app. At least I don't know how. You have to do it on a computer. Their credits apply to fare only. And when you look at Spirit flight prices in more detail, and you really can't do this until you've chosen a route, gone through all the screens about baggage and seat selection and everything. When you get to the very end, it gives you the cost breakdown. And what's pretty famous for Spirit flights is that the fare itself will be like $10, and then the taxes are over 100, and all the extras and all of that, and the credits don't apply to any of those. So your $100 credit might actually only be worth $10. And usually with Spirit credits, there's no residual value. So once you apply that credit, that's it. The rest of it is gone. Those are some of the things to keep in mind when using credits. They can be great. They can be, a nice bonus, but they're not the same as real money. And so it's important to make sure that you are reading the fine print very carefully. And then sometimes you're also doing several searches to figure out the best, most economical use of your credit. And that's where I want to get into another topic, which is travel hacks for using flight credits. So I've mentioned the first one already, booking before the credit expires, but not necessarily traveling now, which can be helpful if you don't have the flexibility in your schedule to travel right away. Looking at different routes. So you might want to be a little bit more flexible in where you're willing to travel or what trip you want to use the credit on to get maximum return on investment. Sometimes it's also helpful to consider booking 2 one-ways instead of a round trip to make the most out of a credit. So let's say you do a search for a round trip. You see a really cheap fare through a travel agent, but you can't use the credit through the travel agent. So you instead go to the airline's website and the flight is much more expensive. Search each leg of the flight or each direction as a separate search, because sometimes what you'll find is that the outbound journey is like 30% of the total and the return journey is 70%. So if that's the case, it might be cheaper to book the outbound journey with the credit through the airline and then the return journey using a travel agent, another airline. I've even seen people mix and match credits. So they'll leave on United using a United credit and they'll return on Spirit using a Spirit credit. So there are all kinds of different options here for you. So I think the thing to keep in mind is that if you do have one of these future flight credits, you just have to be a little bit creative in your thinking and flexible in your manner of booking. So thank you very much for joining me. More content to come. Continue to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to be notified of future videos. Like this video, comment below. Let me know what is your experience using travel credits, which ones have been the most useful, which ones have been the most difficult to work with. And please do let me know any other topics that you'd like to hear on future videos. Thanks so much. Take care.